The wind howled across the frozen wasteland like a dying scream. Ava Reed pulled her thermal suit tighter as she trudged through knee-deep snow, her headlamp cutting a thin beam through the darkness. Titan 7 never saw daylight. The distant sun was just another star in the endless black sky above this miserable moon. She had volunteered for this assignment. 3 years ago, after the accident took her wife and daughter, Ava wanted nothing more than to disappear. The research station on this frozen rock at the edge of known space seemed perfect. 47 other scientists lived here, but Ava barely spoke to any of them. She preferred the ice caves, the silence, the crushing cold that matched the emptiness inside her chest. Today's survey was routine. Check radiation levels, collect ice samples, return before the temperature dropped another 20 degrees. Except the scanner kept picking up something strange. Heat signatures deep in Cave System 7, pulsing like a heartbeat. Probably just geothermal vents, but Ava's scientific curiosity pushed her forward even as common sense screamed at her to turn back. The cave entrance yawned before her like an open mouth. Ice formations hung from the ceiling like teeth. Her boots crunched on frost-covered stone as she descended into the darkness. The heat signature grew stronger with each step. Definitely not vents. Too localized. Too rhythmic. Then she heard it. A sound that made her freeze in place. A whimper. Soft and desperate. Like a puppy left out in the cold, Ava's gloved hand moved to the pistol at her hip. Protocol demanded she report any unknown life forms immediately. But that sound, so small, so afraid. She moved deeper into the cave, following the noise around a corner of ice. What she found made her breath catch in her throat, a creature huddled in a shallow depression where ice had melted away. No bigger than a house cat, covered in deep red scales that glowed faintly in the darkness. Wings folded against its body, torn and bleeding. Forelegs splayed out, too weak to stand. And a face. A reptilian face with large eyes that looked up at Ava with such desperate hope it physically hurt to see. The creature tried to move toward her and collapsed. It whimpered again, and Ava saw its ribs pressing against scaled skin. Starving. Abandoned. Dying alone in the cold. Every regulation she had ever learned told her to back away. Call it in. Let the containment team handle it. Unknown species were dangerous. Unpredictable. This thing had claws and fangs even in its weakened state. But Ava saw something else. She saw her daughter's face that last morning, asking for one more hug before school. She saw every moment of warmth and love that had been ripped away from her. And she saw this tiny creature, alone and terrified, with no one to help it. She knelt down slowly. The creature's eyes tracked her movement, but it didn't try to flee. It just watched, waiting to see if this strange being would help or hurt. Ava pulled off one glove and extended her bare hand. The cold bit at her skin immediately. The creature sniffed cautiously, then pressed its snout against her palm. The touch was warm, not burning hot like she expected, but pleasantly warm like a heated blanket. "Hey there," Ava whispered. "You're in bad shape, aren't you?" The creature made a sound like a purr mixed with a chirp. Its tail, thin and whip-like, curled weakly. Ava looked at the torn wings, the visible injuries, the hollow look of starvation. This creature had been here for days at least, maybe longer, and it was a baby. She could tell by its proportions, the size of its head compared to its body, the way it moved. Whatever species this was a child. She made her decision in that moment. Later, she would question it. Later, she would wonder if grief had broken something in her brain. But right then, with this dying creature looking at her with such trust, Ava knew she could not walk away. She opened her sample case and dumped the ice cores onto the cave floor. Gently, carefully, she scooped the creature up. It weighed almost nothing. She could feel its heart racing against her chest as she tucked it inside her thermal suit against her body. The creature sighed and went still, soaking up her warmth. The trip back to the station took forever. Ava's mind raced through plans. Her quarters were private. She had food synthesizer access, medical supplies in her personal kit. She could hide this, just for a little while. just until the creature was strong enough to survive on its own. She slipped through the service entrance during shift change. The hallways were empty. Her door hissed shut behind her, and she finally let herself breathe. Ava laid the creature on her bed and grabbed her medical scanner. The readings made no sense. Body temperature fluctuating wildly. Strange organ structures, but definitely alive. Definitely in pain. She synthesized a protein paste and offered it on her finger. The creature licked it cautiously, then ate with desperate hunger. After 3 portions, it finally stopped and looked up at Ava with those large, intelligent eyes. "You need a name," Ava said softly. She touched the deep red scales that covered the creature's body. They reminded her of rubies catching light. "How about Ruby?" The creature, Ruby, chirped and climbed into Ava's lap. She curled into a tight ball and closed her eyes. Within seconds, she was asleep, purring softly. Ava sat there on her bed, a dangerous, unknown creature in her arms, and felt something she had not felt in 3 years. Purpose. Connection. The ice around her heart cracked just a little bit. Outside, Titan 7's wind continued to howl. But inside this small room, there was warmth. Ruby's tail twitched in her sleep, and Ava smiled for the first time since her family died. 3 weeks changed everything. Ava stared at Ruby, who now took up half her bed and looked back at her with adoring eyes. The tiny creature that fit in her sample case had grown to the size of a large dog. Red scales gleamed in the soft light of Ava's quarters, each one perfectly formed and beautiful. Ruby's wings had healed, though she had not tried to fly yet. She seemed content to stay close to Ava, following her around the small room like a devoted pet. Except Ruby was no pet. She was something far more incredible. Ava had spent every spare moment studying her mysterious companion. Ruby understood commands, not just simple ones like sit or stay, but complex instructions. She could open containers, manipulate objects with surprising dexterity, and even seemed to understand when Ava was upset. Yesterday, after a particularly frustrating data analysis session, Ruby had gently nudged Ava's hand and made a comforting rumbling sound deep in her chest. The intelligence in those eyes was undeniable. This was not an animal. This was a person, just in a different form. But intelligence brought its own problems. Ruby was learning about her own abilities, and some of those abilities were terrifying. Ava watched as Ruby practiced controlling her internal heat. The young dragon could raise her body temperature at will, her scales glowing cherry red when she concentrated. At first, this happened randomly, usually when Ruby got excited or frightened. She had melted a food dish, scorched Ava's pillow, and left scorch marks on the metal floor. Now, with patient coaching, Ruby was learning control. Ava would hold up her hand and Ruby would focus, her scales darkening as she pulled the heat inward. Then, on command, Ruby would release just a little warmth, enough to make Ava's hand pleasantly warm but not burned. "Good girl," Ava praised, running her fingers over Ruby's snout. Ruby purred and nuzzled closer. The food situation was becoming critical. Ruby ate constantly, her growing body demanding massive amounts of protein. Ava had been synthesizing triple her normal ration for weeks, claiming she was conducting nutritional experiments. But people were starting to notice. The previous night, David from engineering had stopped her in the hallway. "Hey Ava, you training for a marathon or something? Your food requests are through the roof." She had laughed it off, mumbled something about metabolism studies, and hurried away. But David's eyes had been curious, suspicious even. And then there were the sounds. Ruby tried to be quiet, she really did. But sometimes she had nightmares. She would whimper and thrash, her tail striking the walls, her claws scratching across the floor. Last week, someone had filed a noise complaint about Ava's quarters. The station commander had sent a polite but firm message asking her to keep it down. Ava knew she was living on borrowed time. Discovery was inevitable. She just hoped to keep Ruby safe a little longer, at least until she figured out what to do. That hope died on a Tuesday. Ava had left Ruby alone while she attended a mandatory staff meeting. Ruby had been sleeping peacefully, curled up on the bed. Ava figured 2 hours would be fine. She returned to chaos. The door to her quarters stood open. Two maintenance workers were inside, staring at a hole in the wall. Not a small hole, a melted hole, edges still glowing faintly, opening into the service corridor beyond. And in the center of the room, looking absolutely miserable and terrified, was Ruby. Ava, one of the workers, a woman named Chun, said slowly. What exactly is that? Ruby whimpered and tried to hide behind the bed, but she was too big now. Her red scales caught the light. Her wings folded tight against her body in fear. Ava's mind went blank. Then training kicked in. Stay calm. Control the situation. She's a research specimen, Ava said, walking into the room with false confidence. Xenobiology project. Classified. That thing melted through a reinforced wall panel, the other worker said, his hand on the emergency comm. I'm calling security. No. Ava stepped between them and Ruby. She had a nightmare. She didn't mean to. She's harmless. Harmless. Chun pointed at the melted wall. Are you insane? Ruby made a sad chirping sound. Ava felt the dragon's snout press against her back, seeking comfort, seeking protection from these strangers who were clearly frightened. The worker's finger moved toward the comm button. Please, Ava said quietly. Don't. But it was too late. The alarm sounded throughout the station. Emergency protocols engaged. Automated systems sealed off Ava's section. Through the wall panels, Ava heard boots pounding in hallways. Security was coming. Ruby began to panic. Her scales started glowing as her body temperature rose. Not from aggression, but from pure fear. She pressed harder against Ava, trying to make herself smaller, trying to disappear. It's okay, Ava whispered, turning to wrap her arms around Ruby's neck. I've got you. I won't let them hurt you. Ruby's temperature cooled slightly at Ava's touch. The glowing dimmed. She trusted Ava completely, even as armed security personnel poured into the room. The station commander, a stern man named Peterson, stood in the doorway. His eyes went wide at the sight of Ruby. Dr. Reed, he said slowly, step away from that creature. No. That's an order. I said no. Ava stood her ground. She's not dangerous. She's scared. Look at her. Ruby was trembling, her head tucked under Ava's arm, her tail wrapped around Ava's legs. For all her size and power, she looked like exactly what she was. A frightened child, but Peterson saw something else. He saw claws that could rend metal, scales that could withstand weapons fire, heat that could melt through station walls. He saw a threat. Station lockdown, Peterson ordered. Classify this creature as Code Black. Containment team, prepare the holding cells. She's not going in a cage, Ava said. You don't have a choice. Ava looked at the armed guards, at Peterson's hard expression, at Chun and the other worker backing away in fear. She looked at Ruby, whose entire world had just been shattered, who was looking up at Ava with complete trust. Something inside Ava shifted. The fog that had surrounded her for 3 years burned away. She had spent so long being numb, being dead inside, just going through motions. Ruby had changed that. Ruby had given her something to care about again, something to fight for, and Ava would fight. You'll have to go through me, she said simply. To Peterson's expression hardened. The guards raised their weapons. Ruby whimpered and pulled Ava closer, her wings spreading protectively around the woman who had saved her life. In that moment, standing between the creature she had grown to love and the people who would take her away, Ava finally felt alive again. The diplomatic shuttle arrived 4 days later, sleek and silver against the black sky. Ava watched from her quarters window as it docked with the station. Ruby pressed against her side, sensing her tension. They had been prisoners since the discovery. Not locked in cells, thankfully. Peterson had allowed them to remain in Ava's quarters under armed guard. But the door was sealed and monitored. Food came through a slot. No communication with the outside. Just waiting. Ruby had been perfect. Despite the stress, despite the fear, she had remained calm and gentle. She had not tried to escape or attack. She simply stayed close to Ava, offering comfort with her presence. The guards had noticed. Ava saw them exchange confused glances when Ruby purred or when she carefully avoided stepping on Ava's belongings. But it would not be enough. Ava knew that. The door hissed open. Peterson entered, followed by three beings that made Ava's breath catch. Aliens. Real, actual aliens. Humanity's first contact with alien species had happened only 15 years ago, and seeing them in person still felt surreal. The lead figure stood nearly 7 feet tall. Insectoid, with a segmented body covered in smooth green chitin. 4 arms, each ending in 3-fingered hands. Compound eyes that reflected light like jewels. Delicate antennae that moved constantly, tasting the air. Dr. Reed, Peterson said formally. This is Ambassador S.H. Lara of the Galactic Council's Biological Oversight Committee. S.H. Lara's mandibles clicked in what might have been a greeting. When she spoke, her voice came through a translator device clipped to her thorax. Dr. Reed, we have traveled far to examine your discovery. The ambassador's compound eyes fixed on Ruby, who shrank back behind Ava. The other 2 aliens, smaller beings with fur-covered bodies and large eyes, carried scanning equipment that hummed and beeped. May I approach? S.H. Lara asked, already moving forward. Slowly, Ava warned. She's frightened. S.H. Lara stopped. Her antennae twitched. Of course she is frightened. Fear is the Pyrian hatchling's greatest deception. Pyrian. Ava's heart sank. The ambassador knew what Ruby was. That meant there were records. History. That is what you have been harboring, Dr. Reed. A Pyrian drake. One of the most dangerous apex predators in known space. S.H. Lara's tone was almost sad. I am sorry you became attached. That makes this more difficult. One of the smaller aliens activated a holographic display. Images filled the air above its device. Ava watched in growing horror. Massive creatures, 20 times Ruby's size, with scales like armor and wings that blotted out suns. They breathed fire that melted starship hulls. They tore through space stations like paper. World after world shone in ruins, burning cities, and fleeing populations. The Pyrians, Seichara narrated, have been a scourge upon the galaxy for millennia. They appear without warning, destroy everything in their path, and vanish. We know almost nothing about them. Where they come from, how they breed, why they attack. We only know destruction. Ruby's not like that, Ava protested. She's gentle, sweet. She's never hurt anyone. Not yet. S.H. Lara's mandibles clicked sharply. The hatchlings are always docile. We have records of 3 previous instances where young Pyrians were found. In each case, the beings who discovered them believe the same as you. But they could be tamed, domesticated, loved. The hologram shifted to show a pastoral world, green and thriving. Then fire. A Pyrian, smaller than the others, but still massive, emerged for what looked like a research facility. It burned everything. Millions died before the Galactic Council's fleet could respond. That one was raised by the Tolari, Sishlara said quietly. They are a species that values all life, that refuses violence in any form. They named their Pyrian Swift Wind and treated it like a cherished child. For 2 years, it was gentle, loving, perfect. The hologram showed the aftermath. Entire cities reduced to ash. On its 2nd birthday, something changed. A maturity trigger, perhaps. A genetic switch. We do not know. But Sweet Wind became a monster in seconds. It killed its caretakers first. The ones who loved it most. Ava felt sick. Ruby made a questioning sound, concerned by Ava's distress. She's different, Ava insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. They always seem different. That is how Pyrians survive their vulnerable youth. They make us love them, trust them, protect them. Then they betray that trust. S.H. Lara moved closer, and Ruby growled softly. I can see the bond between you. It is real from your side, but from hers? Instinct, programming, survival mechanism. No. Ava knelt beside Ruby, looking into those intelligent eyes. I know what I see. She's not faking this. The Tolari said the same thing, as did the Krell. And the Ventari. S.H. Lara's voice was gentle now, almost kind. I take no pleasure in this, Dr. Reed. But the Galactic Council's position is absolute. All Pyrian drakes must be eliminated before they reach maturity. For the safety of all civilized worlds. You want to kill her. The words came out flat, emotionless. She is not a her, Dr. Reed. She is a biological weapon that happens to look vulnerable right now. In 6 months, maybe a year, she will be large enough to threaten this entire station. In 5 years, she could destroy fleets. Ruby pressed closer to Ava, her body warm and solid. She was not glowing with heat or preparing to attack. She was seeking comfort from the only being she trusted. I have brought an extraction team, Sage Lara continued. They are experts in handling dangerous specimens. The procedure will be quick, painless. It is the most mercy we can offer. When? Ava asked, her voice hollow. 48 hours. We must file the proper documentation, follow protocols. This will give you time to say goodbye. S.H. Lara turned to leave, her two assistants following. At the door, she paused and looked back. I have seen many species in my career, Dr. Reed. I have learned that sometimes the most dangerous things are the ones that make us feel safe. The Pyrians are proof of that. They are evolution's perfect trap. Her antennae drooped sadly. I am sorry. Truly. The door sealed shut. The holographic images faded, but Ava could still see them in her mind. Burning worlds. Dead civilizations. All because someone believed a monster could be loved into being gentle. Ruby chirped softly and licked Ava's face. Then she did something that broke Ava's heart. She rolled on her back, exposing her vulnerable belly, tail wagging slightly. The universal sign of trust and submission. Ava looked at this creature who had brought light back in her dark world. This being who had given her purpose again, who had made her laugh and feel and care. And she had to decide if she believed what she saw or what she was told at 48 hours to choose between the evidence of her eyes and the warnings of an entire galaxy. Ava had not slept in 36 hours. Her eyes burned as she scrolled through page after page of Galactic Council records, searching for something, anything that would prove Sishlara wrong. Ruby dozed on the bed, exhausted from stress. Every few minutes, she would whimper in her sleep, and Ava would reach over to stroke her scales, calming her. The gesture was automatic now, as natural as breathing. The records painted a grim picture. 17 documented Pyrian attacks over the past 3 centuries. Billions dead. Entire civilizations erased. And every single attack followed the same pattern. A hatchling found and raised with love, followed by sudden, catastrophic violence. But something nagged at Ava's scientific mind. Something that did not fit. She pulled up the files again, reading more carefully this time. There, the Tolari discovery. They had found their Pyrian hatchling floating in space debris alone. The Krell had discovered theirs in an escape pod near a destroyed transport. The Ventari found theirs in the wreckage of what appeared to be a mining facility, always alone, always separated from others, never with family. Ava sat back, her mind racing. Earth animals that were raised without parents often developed behavioral problems. Wolves became aggressive. Primates failed to socialize properly. Even humans needed nurturing to develop correctly. What if Pyrians were the same? She dug deeper into the files, looking for any mention of adult Pyrians with young. Nothing. Every record showed lone adults attacking, destroying, then vanishing. No nests. No family groups. No evidence of parental care. Because we keep killing the babies before they can become parents, Ava whispered to the empty room. Ruby stirred her voice. The dragon lifted her head, yawned, and stretched like a cat before padding over to rest her head on Ava's lap. Her eyes, so full of intelligence and trust, looked up at Ava with complete devotion. Ava thought about the past 3 weeks. How Ruby had learned. Not through fear or force, but through patience and positive reinforcement. When Ruby had accidentally burned Ava's hand in the early days, the dragon had been devastated. She had whimpered and refused to eat until Ava convinced her it was okay. That accidents happened. That was not programming. That was empathy. Genuine emotional response. Ruby demonstrated it every day. When Ava was sad, Ruby would nuzzle her. When Ava worked long hours, Ruby would bring her things to make her laugh. A stolen sock, a data pad, once somehow an entire pillow from the bed. Ruby had been so proud of that accomplishment, her tail wagging as she presented her gift. These were not the behaviors of a biological weapon. These were the behaviors of someone who loved and wanted to be loved in return. Ava made her decision. "We're leaving," she told Ruby. The dragon's ears perked up, understanding the tone, if not the exact words. Ava accessed the station's systems, using her clearance codes to review the security schedule. The guards outside her door changed shifts at midnight. There would be a 3-minute window during handoff. The docking bay had a small research vessel that Ava was certified to pilot. If she could get there undetected, if she could override the launch protocols, if she could escape before the station's defensive systems activated. Too many ifs. But the alternative was watching Ruby die in 12 hours. Ava began gathering supplies. Food synthesizer cartridges. Medical kit. Her research notes on Ruby. She worked quickly, efficiently, trying not to think about what she was doing. Stealing station property. Violating quarantine protocols. Fleeing from the Galactic Council. These were career-ending actions. Possibly life-ending that a soft knock at the door made her freeze. Not the usual guard knock. This was gentle, almost hesitant. "Dr. Reed," David's voice muffled through the door. "I know you're awake. Can we talk?" Ava opened the door crack. David stood there with 2 others. Lee, the medical officer who had been friendly to Ava during her first year on the station, and Chun, the maintenance worker who had discovered Ruby. "We're not supposed to be here," Lee said quickly, glancing down the corridor. "But we needed to see you before tomorrow." "Why?" Ava asked suspiciously. Chin spoke up, her voice quiet. "I've been thinking about what I saw. That creature. Ruby, right? She was scared. Not angry. Not aggressive. Just scared. I accessed the medical scans you've been running," Lee added. "Her neural patterns. The brain activity. That's not a simple predator brain, Ava. That's complex cognitive function. Language centers. Emotional regulation. She's sapient." David stepped forward. "We know what you're planning. Escape. And we want to help." Ava's throat tightened. "You'll be arrested. Charged as accomplices." "Maybe," David shrugged. "But I've been working in space for 20 years. I've seen a lot of aliens. A lot of species. And I've learned something. Fear makes people do terrible things. The Council is afraid of Pyrians, so they kill the babies. But maybe if someone actually tried to raise one with love, to teach one how to be gentle, maybe things would be different. You showed us that," Chin said softly. "The way she looks at you. The way she responds to your voice. That's not deception. That's real." Lee handed Ava a data chip. "Codes for the research vessel. I've already prepped it with extra supplies and overridden the launch safety protocols. You'll have a 10-minute head start before anyone realizes you're gone." "The guard shift change happens in 40 minutes, David said. "Chun and I will create a distraction at the power junction. Lee will cover the security feeds. You get Ruby to base 7 and you run. Don't look back." Ava stared at these 3 people who were risking everything for a creature they barely knew. "Why would you do this?" Lee smiled sadly. "You saved my daughter's life last year when she had that allergic reaction. You spent 16 hours in surgery making sure she survived. You didn't have to. She wasn't your patient. But you did it anyway because you cared. We all saw what happened to you after your family died," Chen added. "How you just sort of faded. Stopped caring. But these past few weeks, you've been different. Alive again. That creature did that. She saved you just like you saved her. And maybe that's what humans do best," David said. "We look at something the whole galaxy says is a monster, and we see a person. We see potential. We see someone worth saving." Ruby, curious about the visitors, came to the door. She looked at the 3 humans and tilted her head, then chirped a greeting. Chen laughed despite herself. "Yeah," she said. "Definitely not a monster." They went over the plan twice more. Ava memorized every step, every timing. When they left, each of them paused to touch Ruby gently, a silent goodbye and good luck. 37 minutes later, as alarms began to blare from a manufactured power surge, Ava and Ruby slipped through empty corridors toward the docking bay. Ruby moved silently despite her size, trusting Ava completely. The research vessel was small but fast. Ava strapped into the pilot's seat, while Ruby curled in the passenger space, her wings tucked tight. The engines hummed to life. "Vessel 7, "You're not cleared for launch," came Peterson's voice over the comm. "I know," Ava replied. She engaged the engines. "Dr. Reed, stop. That creature cannot leave this station." "Her name is Ruby," Ava said, "and we're going home, wherever that might be." The vessel launched into the darkness of space, leaving Titan 7 behind. Ava knew pursuit would come. The Council would not give up easily. But for now, they were free. Ruby made a happy, chirping sound and pressed her snout against the viewport, watching stars streak past. "We're going to figure this out," Ava promised her. "We're going to prove them wrong." Together, Ruby purred and curled closer to Ava's chair. In the cold vastness of space, they had each other, and sometimes that was enough. The fuel gauge blinked red. 3 weeks of running, jumping between abandoned stations and remote asteroid belts, and they were finally out of options. Ava stared at the readout, doing calculations in her head. Enough power for one more jump. Maybe. Ruby had grown again. She now filled most of the small vessel's cargo space, her body the size of a pony. Wings that could finally spread fully, though there was no room to use them here. Scales that gleamed like polished gemstones. An intelligence that grew sharper every day. Ava had been teaching her. Not just commands, but concepts. Ruby could count now. She understood cause and effect. Yesterday, she had solved a puzzle box that Ava had created, figuring out the sequence needed to open it in less than 10 minutes. More importantly, Ruby had perfect control over her heat generation. She could raise or lower her temperature at will, maintain it precisely, even focus it to specific parts of her body. When Ava's thermal regulator had broken during week 2, Ruby had kept them both warm through the cold of space, maintaining exactly the right temperature for hours. But control and intelligence would not matter if they froze or starved. They needed supplies. They needed help. The navigation computer showed a trading outpost 3 hours away. Freeport Station, a massive ring structure that served as a neutral meeting ground for dozens of species. Dangerous in its own way, but their only option. "We're taking a risk," Ava told Ruby. "These places don't like humans much, and they definitely won't like you." Ruby chirped and pressed her head against Ava's hand. "Trust. Always trust." Freeport Station loomed ahead, a metal ring spinning in the void. Ships of every size and configuration docked at its outer ports. Ava found a small berth in a quiet section and sealed the vessel. "Stay close," she told Ruby. "Don't leave my side no matter what." They emerged into chaos. The station's central hub was a massive open space filled with market stalls, bars, and beings from across the galaxy. The smell hit Ava first. A mix of alien foods, chemical compounds, and thousands of different life forms in close proximity. Ruby's nostrils flared, processing the overwhelming sensory input. Heads turned as they passed. Conversation stopped. Ava heard whispers in a dozen languages. She kept walking, one hand on Ruby's shoulder, trying to project confidence she did not feel that a tall being with gray skin and too many joints stepped into their path. Humans aren't welcome here. And whatever that thing is, it's definitely not welcome. "We're just passing through," Ava said calmly. "We need supplies, then we'll leave." "That creature is a Pyrrhian." Another voice, this one belonging to a scaled being with vertical pupils. "I saw the council alerts. There's a bounty on both of you." Ruby growled softly, not threatening, but nervous. Ava felt the dragon's temperature start to rise that a crowd was gathering. Hostile faces, weapons being drawn. Ava's hand moved to her own sidearm, but she was outnumbered 50-1. Then a child's scream cut through the tension. High above, on one of the station's upper walkways, a small reptilian being had climbed over a safety rail. Playing, probably, not understanding the danger. As Ava watched in horror, the child lost their grip. They fell. Ruby moved faster than thought. She spread her wings and launched herself upward. Ava had never seen her fly before. The dragon's movements were clumsy, unpracticed, but driven by pure instinct. She caught the falling child gently in her claws, wings beating hard to slow their descent. Ruby landed carefully, setting the child down with the gentleness of a mother placing a newborn in a crib. The child, no more than 3 feet tall with large eyes and soft scales, looked up at Ruby in wonder rather than fear. Ruby chirped softly and nuzzled the child, checking for injuries. Finding none, she carefully guided the small being toward a parent who had rushed down from the walkway, screaming their child's name in a language Ava did not recognize. The parent froze, seeing Ruby. Then they saw their child, unharmed and smiling. They looked at Ruby, then at Ava, then back at Ruby. Slowly, tentatively, the parent reached out and touched Ruby's snout. "Thank you," they said in heavily accented standard. "Thank you." Ruby purred and gently licked the child's head before returning to Ava's side. The crowd had gone completely silent. An older human pushed through the onlookers. He was massive, heavily scarred, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He wore the insignia of a station administrator. "That was a Pyrian Drake," he said, voice gravelly. "Yes," Ava replied, waiting for the accusations. "I've been running stations for 60 years. Seen more species than I can count. Seen predators. Seen killers." The old man looked at Ruby, who was now grooming herself like a cat, completely calm. "Never seen a predator stop to help prey." He extended a weathered hand to Ava. "Name's Holt. I run this place. You two need supplies. We need a lot of things," Ava admitted. Holt grunted. "Council's got alerts out. Big bounty. Most folks here would turn you in for that kind of money." "I know, but I didn't survive this long by following every rule the council makes." He gestured for them to follow. "Come on, let's get you fed and fueled. Then we need to talk about what you're really trying to do here." Holt's private office was surprisingly clean and organized. He poured Ava something that tasted like terrible coffee and tossed Ruby a chunk of protein that she caught and swallowed gratefully. "So," Holt said, settling into his chair, "you stole a Pyrian hatchling and ran. Council wants you dead. Every bounty hunter in 3 sectors is looking for you. And you're trying to prove what exactly? That they're wrong," Ava said simply. "The council thinks Pyrians are biological weapons. I think they're just traumatized children who never had a chance to be anything else." "Based on what?" 3 weeks with one specimen. "Based on everything I've seen. Ruby learns. She cares. She just saved a child she'd never met, from a species she'd never encountered, for no reason except it was the right thing to do." Holt was quiet for a long moment. "The council's been tracking Pyrians for centuries. They have data, evidence, bodies. They have patterns, not causation." Ava leaned forward. "Every Pyrian they've documented was found alone, separated from family, raised in isolation or captivity. We do that to human children. They develop serious psychological problems, violent tendencies, inability to bond. Why would Pyrians be different?" "So your theory is what? The council's been creating the monsters they fear by killing the parents and traumatizing the young." "Yes." Ruby had finished her food and was exploring the office, carefully examining objects without touching them. She found a holographic family photo on Holt's desk and chirped curiously. "My grandkids," Holt said softly. "Haven't seen them in 5 years. Station life doesn't leave much time for family." Ruby made a sad sound and gently nuzzled the hologram with her snout, as if trying to comfort the sadness in Holt's voice. The old man's expression shifted. She understood that. The emotion in what I said. "She's trying to make me feel better." "She does that," Ava said. "All the time." Holt stood and walked to the window overlooking the station's central hub. Below, the child Ruby had saved was pointing up at Holt's office, clearly telling their family the story. A crowd was gathering, but not hostile this time. Curious. "I can give you sanctuary," Holt said finally. "For a while, at least. Council doesn't have jurisdiction in free ports. But they'll come eventually. They always do." "I know. But every day Ruby lives is another day of proof that she's not what they think she is. And if you're wrong? If she turns violent like all the others?" Ava looked at Ruby, who was now trying to carefully fit herself into a chair that was too small for her, determined to sit properly like the adults. She looked ridiculous and adorable, tongue sticking out in concentration. "Then I'm wrong," Ava said. "But I've been watching her for weeks now. She's not going to turn into a monster unless we make her one." Holt nodded slowly. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish. Maybe both. He turned back to them. You can stay. Use the guest quarters. I'll spread word that you're under my protection. But Ava, you need to understand something. The council won't stop. And when they come, I won't be able to protect you. I understand. Good. Holt smiled slightly. Now let's get that dragon of yours a proper meal. If she's going to save my station's children, least I can do is feed her right. Ruby's tail wagged at the word meal, and Ava laughed for the first time in weeks. They came on a Tuesday, exactly 6 weeks after Ava and Ruby had arrived at Freeport Station Point. 3 Council warships dropped out of hyperspace and took up positions around the station. Holt's face was grim as he activated the station-wide comm system. All residents, this is Administrator Holt. We have Council vessels demanding entry. No one panic. No one do anything stupid. Ava stood in the central hub with Ruby at her side. The dragon had grown again, now the size of a small shuttle, with wings that could span 30 feet when fully extended. Her scales had deepened to a dark crimson, and her eyes held wisdom beyond her months. But she was still gentle, still kind. The station's residents had learned that over the past weeks, Ruby had become something of a mascot, helping with repairs by using her controlled heat to weld metal, playing gently with children of a dozen species, and greeting everyone with the same cheerful chirp. Word had spread across the sector. The Pyrian who was not a monster. Traders carried the story to other stations. Scientists requested permission to study her. And the council had finally had enough. Ambassador Severa walked through the docking port flanked by armed guards. Her antennae twitched as she surveyed the crowd that had gathered. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy, all standing between the council and Ruby. Dr. Reed, Sishlara said formally, your flight ends today. She hasn't done anything wrong, Ava replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She exists. That is enough. S.H. Lara's mandibles clicked with what might have been regret. I take no pleasure in this, but the law is clear. All Pyrian drakes must be eliminated before maturity. She's already mature, Ava countered. Look at her size. By your own records, she should have turned violent weeks ago. But she hasn't. She won't. One specimen does not disprove centuries of data. Then let me give you more data. Ava pulled up a holographic display. I've documented everything. Ruby's development, her learning, her emotional responses. Her brain scans show the same patterns as sapient species. She's not an animal, Ambassador. She's a person. S.H. Lara examined the data with her compound eyes. Impressive, but irrelevant. The law exists for a reason. Bad laws should be challenged. A new voice joined the conversation. The parent whose child Ruby had saved stepped forward. My daughter would be dead if not for this Pyrian. She chose to help. No one forced her. I run 17 different businesses on this station. A scaled merchant called out. That dragon helped me repair a cooling system that would have cost me thousands. Didn't ask for payment. Just did it because I needed help. More voices joined in. Stories of Ruby's kindness, her helpfulness, her gentle nature. The crowd grew louder, more insistent. Seva raised one clawed hand for silence. Your testimonials are noted, but they change nothing. The council's decision is final. Ruby, who had been sitting quietly through all of this, finally stood. She walked forward slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. The guards raised their weapons, but Sechlara signaled them to hold. Ruby stopped directly in front of the ambassador. Then she did something that made the entire crowd gasp. She lowered her head in a gesture of submission and respect, exposing her vulnerable neck. What is she doing? S.H. Lara asked. She's asking you to listen, Ava said softly. Really listen. Ruby began to make sounds. Not random chirps or growls, but complex harmonic frequencies that seemed to resonate in the chest. The universal translator on S.H. Lara's thorax began to process the sounds, struggling with a language it had never encountered. Then words appeared on the holographic display. Not monster, not weapon, just child. Want learn, want help, want home. The station went absolutely silent. Ruby was speaking, communicating in her own language, trying desperately to make them understand. Please, the translation continued. Not like others. Have family. Have, love. Have. Ava. Ruby's voice cracked on that last word, and she looked back at Ava with such love and trust that Ava felt tears streaming down her face. Fitchlara stood frozen. In her long career, she had encountered thousands of species, studied hundreds of languages, but she had never heard Aperians speak. No one had, because no one had ever tried to teach them. She's sapient, S.H. Lara whispered. Truly sapient. Yes, Ava said, and I think all of them are. All the Pyrians who attacked, who destroyed. They were people driven mad by isolation and trauma. They were children who grew up alone, scared, and angry. We made them into monsters. The ambassador's antennae drooped. If that is true, then the Council has committed genocide. We have killed thousands of intelligent beings based on fear. You didn't know, Ava said gently. But now you do. Now you have a choice. You can keep following the old path, or you can try something new. S.H. Lara looked at Ruby, who was still holding her submissive pose, still waiting for judgment. The ambassador's mandibles clicked in what was clearly an expression of deep thought. The law requires that I eliminate all Pyrian threats, S.H. Lara said slowly. Then her posture shifted, becoming less formal. But the law also allows for exceptions in cases of sapient species misidentified as animals. I believe we have such a case here. Hope flared in Ava's chest. I am placing you both under probationary status, S.H. Lara continued. You will establish a research facility on the moon orbiting this station. Ruby will be monitored continuously. Any sign of aggression, any threat to others, and this ends immediately. But if she continues to demonstrate peaceful behavior, if she can teach others of her kind to be the same, then perhaps we can undo some of the damage we have caused. The crowd erupted in cheers. Ruby lifted her head, understanding that something good had happened, and her tail began to wag so hard it knocked over a cargo container. Ava laughed and cried at the same time, wrapping her arms around Ruby's massive neck. The dragon purred and wrapped her wings around Ava, creating a warm cocoon. Thank you, Ava said to S.H. Lara. Do not thank me yet. You have taken on an enormous responsibility, changing how the galaxy sees an entire species. S.H. Lara's antennae twitched in what might have been approval. But if any human can do it, I believe it is you. 6 months later, the research facility on Moon Station Hope was thriving. Ava stood in the observation room, watching through a window as Ruby gently taught a newly rescued Pyrian hatchling how to control its temperature. The little one, barely bigger than a cat, was struggling. But Ruby was patient, demonstrating again and again until the hatchling finally managed to dim its glow. Ruby chirped with pride and nuzzled her student. The hatchling purred and curled up against her, seeking comfort and warmth. 3 other young Pyrians were in the enclosure, all at different stages of development, all learning, all growing under Ruby's guidance and Ava's care. Word had spread. Other species had begun bringing their own dangerous young ones to the facility. Not just Pyrians, but creatures from across the galaxy that were feared and misunderstood. Hope Station had become a place where monsters learned to be people. Holt visited regularly, bringing supplies and stories for Freeport. David, Lee, and Chen had been cleared of all charges and visited when they could. Even S.H. Lara stopped by occasionally, documenting Ruby's progress for the Council. But the best part, the part that made all the struggle worthwhile, came every evening when the work was done. Ava would sit in her quarters, reviewing data, and Ruby would curl up beside her. The dragon was fully grown now, massive and powerful enough to destroy a fleet if she wanted. Instead, she used her strength to protect, her heat to help, her intelligence to teach. She had become exactly what Ava always believed she could be. Not a monster, not a weapon, just a person trying to do good in a complicated galaxy. Home, Ruby rumbled one evening, having fully mastered spoken language. Her voice was deep and musical, filled with warmth. We found home. Ava leaned against Ruby's warm side, feeling safe and loved and purposeful. They had come so far from that frozen cave on Titan 7. So much had changed, but one thing remained constant. Yes, Ava said softly. We found home, together. Ruby purred and wrapped a wing around Ava. Outside the window, stars glittered in the endless dark. But inside there was light. There was warmth. There was family. The lonely dragon, Hatchling, had finally found where she belonged. And in doing so, she had helped a broken woman find her way back to hope. Home was not a place. It never had been. Home was this. Two beings from different worlds, different species, different everything, choosing to care for each other. Choosing to build something beautiful from fear and loneliness. The galaxy had called Ruby a monster, but Ava had called her adorable. And in that single act of seeing potential instead of threat, of choosing love over fear, everything changed. Not just for Ruby, not just for Ava, but for countless beings across the stars who would learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is also the most important. Choose compassion. Choose understanding. Choose to see the person hiding behind the label of monster, because everyone deserves the chance to find their home.